How to make sourdough bread from start to finish. So this is the night before I plan to make my dough. I have 50 grams of sourdough starter in this jar, and I'm going to feed it a 1:1:1 ratio. That means 1 part starter, 1 part flour, and 1 part filtered water. Because I have 50 grams of starter, I'm putting in 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water, and I'm going to stir well until it's completely combined and there's no pockets of dry flour left. It's going to look a bit like a paste. After that, you want to loosely cover but not seal your jar, and I like to mark where my starter is with a rubber band so I can see how much it grows overnight. By the next morning, your starter should have doubled in size and it's nice and bubbly and ready to bake with. Your supplies for today will be a bowl, the flour that you want to use, a scale or something to measure with, a mixing tool like a Dutch whisk or a big spoon, a towel or something to cover your dough with, and of course your sourdough starter. I forgot salt. You also need salt. I like to put my water in my bowl first because your sourdough starter is ready to bake with when it floats in water. I can tell it's ready because it's bubbly on top and bubbly on the side, but if you watch when I drop it in the bowl, it does float in the water, so it is definitely ready to make bread with. And don't worry if you only have a little starter left over in your jar afterwards. You can scrape the sides, feed it, and you've got more starter for next time. Now you want to whisk the starter in the water until it turns milky and is somewhat combined. If you're using a scale, make sure not to mix while it's on the scale just to not add extra pressure to it. Now you'll go ahead and add your flour. I like to use part whole wheat flour and then bread flour because the whole wheat adds a little extra chewiness and a little extra flavor to me. Next, you can add your salt. Some people wait to add the salt until they do the stretch and folds. I really don't notice much of a difference. And then remove from the scale again if using one and go ahead and stir until you get a nice shaggy dough. This step might take a bit of elbow grease, but you want to make sure you get all the flour combined into the dough ball. Once combined, you'll want to cover it and let it rest for about an hour. I use a shower cap, but you can use a towel, and let it rest at room temperature for 1 hour. Then you're going to begin your stretch and folds. You'll want a wet scraper or spatula so you can scrape the dough away from the sides of the bowl, and you'll also want to wet your hands so that the dough does not stick to your hands. Once you scrape down the sides of your bowl, you want to pick a corner and pull and stretch the dough up and then fold it back over itself. Then rotate the bowl and do that 4 times until you've made it all the way around the bowl and stretched and folded on 4 sides. What this process is doing is building the gluten network in your dough and giving the dough that nice structure that it's going to need to become bread. In total, we're going to do the stretch and fold process 4 times every 30 minutes for the next hour and a half. So this is my first set of stretch and folds. You want to cover it, wait 30 minutes, and then come back and do your second set of stretch and folds. If you don't have a full hour and a half to dedicate to this process, you can do just an hour where you do 3 stretch and folds. So the first stretch and fold, wait 30 minutes, a second stretch and fold, wait 30 more minutes, and then a third stretch and fold. I've done that a few times, and quite frankly, I did not notice much of a difference in the structure of my bread. It still had a really great structure. I usually make my bread on Saturdays, so I'm not in too big of a rush, but that is an option. For my final set of stretch and folds, I just like to coil fold, which is where you lift up from the center of the dough ball and just sort of gently fold it back over itself like a coil. You'll notice the more you stretch and fold the dough, the less it's going to actually want to stretch. So your final set of stretch and folds, it's really not going to move around too much, and that's normal. Once you've done your final set of stretch and folds, you're going to want to cover it and leave it at room temperature until the dough has doubled in size and is jiggly and bubbly on top. That is the bulk fermentation time, which is going to vary greatly depending on the temperature and humidity in your home. Once your bread is done fermenting at room temperature, you're going to want to dump it out onto a very lightly floured surface. You need the dough to stick to itself for this process, so you really want to use flour sparingly here. Now we're going to laminate our dough, which is stretching it out into a very thin rectangle about 12 inches by 16 inches. Of course, you can just use your hands for this. I just find it a little bit easier, and that's one of my long hairs. My hair gets everywhere. I just find it a little easier to use that scraper to stretch it out. Then you're going to fold your dough into thirds like you're folding up a letter, and then roll it up just like a burrito. Try to roll it fairly tightly. You don't want to tear the dough or stretch it too far, but you also don't want to end up with air pockets in your bread. Once you roll it up, you want to fold it back onto itself and then start forming your dough into a nice round ball by using this push and pull motion. This is going to form your dough into that ball while also creating surface tension across the top of the dough, which is what gives sourdough loaves their nice smooth outside crust. Then you're going to want to cover it and let it rest on the counter for about 30 minutes. Once it's done resting, you're going to want to shape it again, but it's really not going to want to stretch nearly as far as it did before. So I like to fold it up into fourths here. Get one side stretched out a little bit, fold it back over itself, get the other side. You're going to shape it like you did before, but like I said, it's not going to stretch really. So just do the best you can. Once you get it folded back up, you're going to fold it back over itself again and do some more of those push and pull motions where you're rolling it. Once you're done shaping it up, you're going to place it into a floured basket. I use a banneton, but you can use a bowl or a basket with a towel inside of it. Then plop it smooth side down in your basket. After that, you'll want to cover it up. I use a shower cap, but you can use a Walmart bag, a towel, or saran wrap and refrigerate it overnight or up to 24 hours. Once you're ready to bake, you'll want to go ahead and be preheating your oven while you score the dough. And as a scoring tip, if you want to make decorative designs in your loaf, do the more delicate and smaller scores first before you do that large expansion score across it. You want to make the expansion score pretty deep, at least an inch deep. This is so that your dough has room to stretch and grow while it's baking in the oven. After scoring, you can go ahead and plop it into your Dutch oven, and I like to bake mine for 30 minutes with the lid on, then take it out and bake it for another 20 minutes with the temperature bumped down by 50 degrees for an additional 20 minutes until I get that nice golden color. If you have a thermometer, you want to bake your bread until the internal temperature gets to be at least 200 degrees. Once removed from the oven, it's still baking internally, so you want to wait until it's completely cooled before you cut it. I like to wait until the next day just because it's easier to cut. But now you can finally enjoy, and that is